Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. And today I'm going to be talking about national polls and talking about undecided voters that pretty much handed the election to Donald Trump back in 2016. So in the United States, we have roughly an even split of party affiliation, meaning the Democrats and the Republicans have roughly the same, voting patterns and same voting groups. There are some registered Democrats and some registered Republicans that probably haven't voted with their respective parties for decades and just haven't changed their party registration. I think a number of southern states are perfect examples of that. I think Kentucky only recently, the Republicans overcame the Democrats in terms of voter registration, but there are some very solid states, including West Virginia, where the Democrats actually have more registered Democrats than Republicans, despite West Virginia being one of the most Republican states in the nation on the presidential level. But that's not what the main focus of this video is. We're talking about undecided voters. Why are we talking about undecided voters? Because in 2016, on the final, national polls on November 8th, 2020, almost got used to saying November 3rd, 2016, Hillary Clinton only had 46% of the vote. Donald Trump received 42% on the final 538 average. Now, if we're talking about these numbers, I guess you could say that's pretty standard for where the election was. We had notable third-party candidates and a number of undecided voters that were ultimately, in the end, the reason why Donald Trump won. But now we switch over to 2020, and you can see while Trump's numbers go up by 1-2%, Biden's numbers go up by an even more significant amount. Biden is up 8% right now, and if you compare it to the 2016 numbers, it's an overall 5% increase, 5% in favor of the Democratic Party. Now, this likely could be due to the fact that Gerin Jera removed himself. He's not running this election. There's a Libertarian Party candidate. There's a Green Party candidate, but neither of which have actually made enough that they even have polls done. People aren't wasting their money on a four-way poll this time. And, Gerin Jera, 3 and 4 Gerin Jera voters, 75% of them said they would have voted for Donald Trump had Gerin Jera not been in the race. This is likely due to the fact that the Libertarian Party was the alternative for Republicans, whereas the Green Party was the alternative for many Democrats. And if we look at the national polls, realistically, Trump's numbers should have gone up, and Joe Biden's numbers should have minimally improved based off Hillary Clinton. But with no Gerin Jera in the race, and Jill Stein's definitely not in the race either, Joe Biden's numbers have done so much better than Hillary Clinton, so much better. And the reason for that is the fact that undecided voters have broke for the Democratic Party. They have, split away from voting for the GOP, not just nationally, but in swing states. Let's take a look at Arizona. Biden is at 49% of the vote. Let's take a look where Trump was on election day in terms of polls. He was only at 46% despite being up 4% in the state. Hillary Clinton only had 42%, and this was a combination of undecided voters and third-party voters. But overall, there were more undecideds in 2016. It wasn't just here, but in a number of other swing states. As we can see, Joe Biden's numbers are doing a lot better. This is a combination of, swing state voters that used to be undecided now moving to the Biden column on top of a number of third-party voters that were widely expected to go to Donald Trump. I mean, we're talking about Libertarian Party voters, 5% in terms of the polls on election day. They didn't come to 5% on in terms of the actual voting groups, but 75% of them said, you know what, I would have voted for Trump. But we're not seeing that reflected now. He would have had way more than a 1.2% improvement from 2016 on election day. But like I said, not just in Arizona, not just nationally, but, in a number of other swing states. Let's take Florida, for example. In this state, Donald Trump was up at 46.6% of the vote, Hillary Clinton at 46.4%. This was off by roughly 1 percentage point. Donald Trump won by 1.2% in this state. Let's take a look at Florida right now, because Florida actually has made some headlines pretty recently because it just narrowed up today. And, it's neck and neck. But even then, Biden is still at a higher point than Hillary Clinton, whereas Donald Trump is right under where he was just 4 years ago on election day. So, looking at a lot of these numbers, we're seeing a number of undecided voters from 2016 on top of these third-party voters that have just dissipated. All of a sudden, back to certain candidate. There wasn't a major push for these third-party candidates. This was not the, all of a sudden enlightenment for the Libertarian Party, all of a sudden the enlightenment for the Green Party, because realistically, we are a two-party system. And generally, people don't like to make, undecided decisions. I mean, people are likely to say they're undecided, and they very well could be, but when it comes down to the ballot box, we've never seen this consistent of a margin for a challenger or even an incumbent over their challenger in a presidential election in decades. I mean, even Ronald Reagan at a point in time was underwater, even in 1984. So with, so many things happening for Joe Biden that are just completely out of the ordinary, we can actually see on the RCP map. This is the 2016 map. 171 electoral votes worth of toss-ups. We see it in very notable states, Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, traditional states, right? Well, now this time, while we do have, I guess you could say, less undecided voters, our electoral map has been expanded. Why? Because Joe Biden has, maybe he hasn't locked down in terms of the RCP ratings. They're very careful with what they do now. I mean, they are characterizing Missouri as a toss-up, characterizing Missouri the same way that they do as Florida. Doesn't make sense, but I'm not going to argue. I'm not the one making these ratings. But, the fact that Missouri is, close, the fact that all of these other swing states are considered swing states is because Joe Biden has actually improved. If you take a look at the states that are considered to be lean Biden, we have Colorado, New Mexico, and Virginia. These were all Bush states in 2004 and competitive through 2016. Now they're Biden states. Biden has done very well in a number of other states that have made the races competitive. Take a look at Texas. Likely Republican 4 years ago, now toss-up. Why is that? Well, take a look at the lead for Donald Trump. Only 3.5%. He led by 12 4 years ago on Election Day. So we're seeing a number of states narrow up. Why? Because Biden is doing very well and winning over a number of people that were previously undecided voters. And looking across the country, we can just go state to state. Georgia, this is actually probably one of the closer states in terms of candidates being under 50%, which is why it's very, very close. But we see Joe Biden starting to take away in Maine at 51% of the vote. We see him take away in states such as Nevada, 47% of the vote, which arguably is not necessarily as high as it is in other states, but then take a look at Donald Trump's numbers, barely hitting 40%. He very well is, he's 1% off from being at 39%. And undecideds in the state typically break for the Democrats. In New Hampshire, Biden is at a cool 51% of the vote. In Ohio, Biden is underwater, but both candidates are roughly near 50%. Let's take a look at a flashback in 2016. That's not the 2016 map. Take a look at Ohio. You see, Trump actually won with 51% of the vote, but, he was at 45% of the vote. Hillary Clinton was at 42% on Election Day. She actually did narrowly outperform those numbers, which I think is pretty interesting, that she only narrowly improved them. Donald Trump did so much better in that state, but Ohio was never really a state that Biden needs to win, but he is neck and neck with Trump. In the state of Pennsylvania, Biden has always hovered around 50%, but right now he's at 50%, 49.6%. Trump's 45%. In Pennsylvania, in 2016, again, like I said, yes, there are more third-party voters, but at the same time, there are a number of other undecided voters as well. You add up the Jill Stein and Gary Johnson numbers here, that doesn't even put Hillary at a solid 50%. So keep that in mind. Actually, no, it puts her barely over 50%, which I honestly think is, that leaves still 6 to 7% of undecided voters. But for a comparison, Hillary Clinton was only up with 46% of the vote. Biden is up with 49% of the vote. Like I said, it goes across to a number of other swing states. In Wisconsin, Biden is at 51%, which means he already has the majority. In Virginia, Biden is at 52%. And when we see, this huge gap of undecided voters, it's honestly very bad for Donald Trump, because if Biden is already at 50.6%, already there, that means literally every other undecided voter could go for Donald Trump and he still loses. But the reality is that these undecided voters, while they may break for Trump in a majority, first of all, it doesn't matter. And number two, Biden will be getting a significant portion of their votes as well, which means he won't just be at 50.6% nationally. He won't just be at 51% in Wisconsin. He could likely be at 52, 53%, return to Obama 2012 numbers. And that is honestly a very grim reality for the Republican Party. Joe Biden is at a majority or very close to a majority in a number of swing states because undecided voters have moved over to the Biden column. Third-party voters have moved over to the Biden column. And you still have around 5-6% undecided voters that could swing either way, which means Joe Biden would only continue to expand his lead because he doesn't care, if Trump gets within a percentage point of him, if he's still at a majority. If he's still winning the state overall, it doesn't matter where Trump is at. Because at the end of the day, it's a winner-take-all system. It's not proportional unless you're Nebraska or Maine. And, even then, those districts are winner-take-all. And overall, Biden is the person who's going to come out on top at this point. He's leading with 50% leads or nearly 50% leads in a number of swing states. Taking a look at Arizona, he's at 49%. 1% off with what? 7% undecided voters. He's up in Maine at 51%. In Nevada, he does need a little bit of work, but we're talking about, 13% undecided voters? All he needs is 3% of that. Take a look at Pennsylvania. Biden is at 49.1%. 6% undecided voters, needs 0.9 out of that. In Wisconsin, he has it. Looking at a number of these swing states, Biden has the numbers because these undecided voters have simply vanished. They simply said, you know what? We are going to tell you who we're voting for now. And this election, is like no other. Take a look at all of the presidential elections in the past couple of decades. Not one can you point out where a candidate, a challenger to an incumbent, or even an incumbent, led in polling the entirety of the campaign season. Now, this very well could change, but an RNC didn't change it. COVID-19 didn't change it. The Black Lives Matter, movement didn't change it. I almost said riots, but that would have been a completely, gross characterization of what's actually happening. Please don't cherry pick incidents and then say, characterize it as a whole movement because, the president's doing it. But as the numbers reflect, doesn't work. So, the things that are happening, people talked about, the riots in this state, in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Will this change the American electorate? Did it? No. Will the RNC change the American electorate? Did it? No. All of these things that were supposed to be Hail Marys for President Trump. Kamala Harris, even picked as VP, was supposed to be a blessing in disguise for Trump. Was it? No. 56 days until the November general election. 56 days. 2 months. Trump's numbers, are still as bad as they were a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago. And the thing is, the very real reality is, if Donald Trump doesn't turn this election around within the next couple of weeks, if we don't see him start to even come close on the national average, and I hate to say this because a lot of people were wrong in 2016, I very well could be wrong in this election, but because we are seeing an election like no other, we always say, this is the election of our lifetimes. I truly think this is. We're combating climate change. We're combating, a civil rights issue. We're combating, a global pandemic. We're combating an economic fallout, a potential recession. I mean, we're seeing things that the American public usually takes one issue at a time. Oh, I'm voting for the economy this election. Oh, I'm voting for healthcare. It's all combined now. And guess what? Joe Biden is coming out on top right now. So things very well could change. I could be wrong on election day, but Trump has a lot of work to do because these undecided voters are no longer undecided. We're working with a 6 to 7% undecided electorate, but it doesn't matter because Biden is already at 50% in a number of these states. Like I said, painting a very bad reality for Trump that it's going to be very difficult to win. He'd have to convince already determined Biden voters at this point. And I'm not going to say he didn't do well in 2016, but he was working with a much more convincible electorate than people who said they were solidly voting for Hillary Clinton. It's not that he won over previous Clinton voters. He just won over the voters that never said they were voting for Clinton. But this time around, he needs Biden voters to win. So thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2020 election videos. It's just an overall playlist with around 180 videos of my previous, analysis videos. Again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.